Hello, Ike. It's nice to have you again with me on the couch following our session on Sunday. So, for those who don't know you, you are a lecturer and a psychotherapist, and you gave us a lot of insight when we had our original conversation. So, I just want to encourage those who haven't listened to the conversation we had when we were talking about the education experience in two pandemics, whether this is a fair playing field for this generation. So if you haven't heard it, it's still on Facebook, on the Couch with Fols. You can listen to it and you'll hear everything that Ike had to say to us on the day. But coming straight into our conversation today, I picked up a few things from what you said, and I just want to read them back out to you today and ask you for further comments or for you to expand on them, and including anything else that you thought from the day came out that you'd just like to pick up. So some of the things that you said was that the solution is a global solution. And I think you were talking about inclusion and racism then when you were talking about it being a global solution. You talked about social injustice and inequalities being born out of ignorance, especially insecurity and unfamiliarity were the two words you used there. And then you talked about your experience at 11 plus, which was your first experience of racism and how your parents challenged, that at the time, but you still didn't go to the school because, you went somewhere else, but the challenge was in there. And then you then talked about how we need to make people accountable, and take part in the conversation because the whole of society needs to be involved in pointing out that something is wrong. So these are just little things that I picked up from what you said. So I'm going to give you the opportunity now to just sort of expand on some of those thoughts.
Right. Good morning, everybody. Morning, Fols. How are you doing? You all right? Everybody okay?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much for, I guess, this second part. Interviews give an opportunity to expand on what very much is in a person's heart. So really grateful for this. Yes, social injustice is a big thing for me. And I think I'm going to touch on quite a few of those issues that you raised because they all seem to merge into one. My whole view on social injustice is the fact that nobody should be treated unfairly. There's a wonderful statement, and I believe it's in the American Constitution, that everybody is created equally. And so that for me is a very basic tenet. We are all created equally. So why should somebody be offered something that is going to benefit them and that same thing not be offered to somebody else? I was raised that way in a fair society, as best as I was, as best as I knew, until that point that I shared during the original meeting, when I faced racism personally, and I thought, wow, I didn't know it was racism. I just saw it as, this is not fair. This is not fair, because as far as I was concerned, I was just another guy in my class with my buddies. And it was my parents that pointed out there was something that was wrong here. They didn't call it racism. They just said there was an injustice that had taken place. And they did everything they could do to right that wrong. And once they had righted that wrong, they thought, okay, we have made our point. We've made it clear that this is wrong. They've got an apology from the school, but we're not going to accept this place. Because if our son can get into this school, it means he can get into any other school of the same standard. And that was the point they were trying to make. So I'm very grateful I have strong parents, parents who are principled, parents who were not afraid to buck the system. And that was really important to me. And that's this kind of sort of thing that's followed me. And it's how you go about doing this. So this is where I get, the global way of looking at in social injustice. It's a difficult one. I've watched lots of, as probably lots of your audience, I've watched lots of clippings on social media of people expressing their dislike for some of the things that have gone on recently, especially since the passing of Mr. Floyd, horrific as they are. I just think there's got to be a constructive way of doing things. We are not changing anything if we're going to go and break glass windows or go looting and stuff like that. It's not helping. It just simply feeds into the narrative of the people we're supposed to be taking our argument to.
Yeah.
So I always say, if you want to fight a battle, you've got to do it either at the same level as your enemy or better, above. You've got to think better or higher than your, well, I guess, perceived enemy. And that sometimes might be taking the moral high ground. It might be being a bit more tactical. I mean, you look at war generals. You know, both parties want to win. I'm sure both parties will pray to their individual gods, but somebody comes out winning. Who is the winner? The one who thinks tactically. And, you know, you look at all the great generals, the Alexander the Greats and so on and so forth. They would flank their enemies. They would come around. They would surprise them. And sometimes we need to do things like that. If your enemy sees you coming, then it's no surprise, really. If they know what you're going to do, they're not, you know, what's the surprise? You know? So that's my take on that sort of injustice and how we go about fighting it. And very often, if you present a situation in such a way that every single human being, doesn't matter what color they are, doesn't matter what background they are, if every single human being can relate it to themselves and say, I wouldn't like that happening to me, then we have a much better way of fighting it. Because you have, rather than one part of society fighting this battle, you have every member of society saying, that's wrong. Governments, look, at the end of the day, governments, it's a numbers game for them. It's a numbers game for them. And if they have a lot of numbers saying something's wrong, you're likely to have a legislation passed. So that's the way I tend to look at things.
Thank you. And I think that because that brings a different perspective to the conversation. And I do agree with you about being strategic and you know, being more, I love the element of surprise that you talked about, you know, bringing a surprise in. And that comes from a very thoughtful place, you know, and a very thoughtful and intentional place. So thanks for sharing that. And I guess it leads me on to my next question, which is talking about some of the issues that are highlighted when it comes to the Black community. You know, so for example, there are issues that we know around permanent exclusion for Black people. And most of the data is showing that it's always consistently above the national average. We know that there are issues where the data tells us that 5% of students from Black ethnic groups get 3A grades or more. And it's really the lowest of all the measured groups in terms of percentage of A grades, 3A grades or more. We know about the attainment gap, you know, where we know that in HE, and I'm sure maybe even in the FE space, but you'll be able to talk more about that to us. There is a little bit of an attainment gap. Actually, it's not a little bit, it's 22.1% between, you know, the grades and the outcome at the end of that career. And I saw an article recently, it was published by BBC News Education, which was just talking about how universities must do more for Black students. So I don't know what your thoughts are about this, what you think are the underlying issues here that we're dealing with, you know, and what are some of the things that we can do to change this kind of narrative?
Ignorance is and I use that word very, very carefully. So let me rephrase that. Ignorance, a lack of awareness, lack of understanding, and fear. They are detrimental to individuals, and they're detrimental to the society at whole, at large rather, because on a personal basis, you know, on a personal level, if you're unaware of something and you're scared, you're very, very unlikely to try things out. That sense of adventure, that sense of curiosity is not going to be foremost on your mind. And so somebody's going to present an idea to you and you're going to think, oh, I can't do this. That's going to be that person's natural or their default.
Mm.
If you take that to a national level, it's a horrible thing. You have a society that just doesn't want to try things out. It's going to be so myopic in their outlook. Let's go back in time. Now, this might be very delicate, but we look at the empire, the British Empire. You can say that they had that can-do attitude. They had that a sense of adventure, curiosity, name it, that sent them out to different parts of the world.
Mm.
Yeah, wonderful. All of a sudden, having, I suppose, conquered, let's say conquered, uh, vast parts of the world, they seem to have become very myopic,
Mm.
scared of the potential of the people they have supposedly gone to civilize. And so that's where the injustice seems to come in. But let's stick to the ignorance part of things. That same ignorance seems to have pervaded very, very many areas of our society.
Mm.
You look at government, where you could have, I mean, again, it's almost the same thing. You're using one particular group to serve the whole of a whole of society. That's never going to work. You're going to have more dissatisfied people than satisfied people. You're going to have more people who are not being served adequately than those who are being served. And so therefore we come up with statistics like this that say you have more black children who are unfairly treated because the people who are serving them don't know them, don't understand them. So that's one part of the equation. On the other side of the equation, you've got the recipients of service. As people who are integrated into a society, the onus is on us to make ourselves aware of what's available.
Yeah.
Pop down to your local town hall, pop down to your library, find out what is going on in your community. Be part of the community. Know who your neighbors are. I mean, I challenge my students and I say to them, do you know your next door neighbor? Do you know the person who lives across the road from you? I mean, COVID-19 has been a wonderful opportunity for people just to get to know their neighbors.
Right.
I know of people who will, now they do their neighbors' lawns. They do their neighbors' shopping. They found out that, Mrs. Jones, who lives 2 doors down, is 85. And she needs, her daughter can't come over because her daughter lives, thousands of miles away or whatever. I'll do the shopping for her. And, it's wonderful to hear that. But what happened before COVID? Everybody behind their own closed doors. But all of a sudden now, children are playing in streets and they're playing with each other. The parents are getting to know one another because we've been forced into this situation. Yeah. So the government has to do their bit, but we, the recipients, have to do our bit, and we can keep each other accountable. So if something's not happening, there is nothing wrong with saying to your local councillor, excuse me, I am a bona fide member of this society, bona fide member of this community, I pay my poll tax and so on and so forth. Why is there no service for me here? Or why is my road not tarred? Why is my front lawn or wherever, the communal area not tarred or whatever? I walk to my park. Why is the park not lit up? Things like that. There's nothing wrong with that. And most MPs, most constituents, most councillors, civic councillors, they would love for people to be part of that and get involved. So a lot of it is us getting involved. Bring it to education per se. Again, it's parents. I'm a big, I have my story. You've heard my story. My parents, I just can't thank them enough. You're as parents, we have to be involved. Teachers and parents need to be teammates. They need to be teammates. But we have a situation sometimes where teachers are very often seen as just babysitters. And it was at the beginning of the lockdown is interesting. It was done sometimes tongue in cheek, but we saw lots of parents sort of saying thank you to teachers because they realized what teachers actually do. Teachers are professionals. They're not just, it's not a vocation that, I'll just do this because out of the goodness of my heart. That's part of it, but they are professionals. They've gone through years and years of training, dealing with challenging behavior, getting the best out of people, also putting together schemes and strategies and so on and so forth. How do they bring a subject to life to make it interesting for different year groups? They've got to understand what's going on at the different stages in a child's life. You wouldn't present general studies to the same way to an 11-year-old as you would to an 18-year-old. 18-year-old to be bored.
Yes.
Or the 11-year-old would just, oh goodness, this is far too much for me. A good teacher knows how to bring a subject to life. And this is what we've got to realize, that teachers don't want to punish people. It doesn't bring joy to a teacher to exclude a student. I can tell you that. It doesn't bring joy because they want to see. Education is a guaranteed way of progress.
That's right.
And I give a lot of credit to wonderful sportsmen and who use sort of natural gifted talents, but they're 1 in a million. I'll be honest with you. They are, footballers, you can name them, but they are 1 in a million. Education, it's a guaranteed way of progress. Now, how much success one gets, that's down to the individual.
Yeah.
That is down to the individual. So it really is a partnership. Really, really is a partnership. I know you're going to talk to me about teachers later, so we'll talk about that shortly.
Well, I'm going to go on, but I like what you said about education being a guaranteed way, for progress for all of us, for all of us, no matter where you come from, and I do agree that sometimes teachers don't get the credit that they deserve for the tremendous work that they do. And I hope that one of the things that I want to say always on a program like this is how much we appreciate the teachers. I have 3 kids who've gone through the education system, and I thank the teachers for that, for what they are today, for what they put into them. Yes, they've had all kinds of experiences and we've had to work through all of that together as a team, but you see the kids today, the young ones that came on the panel,
Fantastic.
You look at them, that is because somebody, teachers across that sphere of education has put something into them that has made them the confident, outspoken, successful in their own way, young adults that they have become. So that's worth acknowledging.
Definitely.
So my next thing is to do with teachers, because we do know, having said that there are challenges, for teachers within that system, especially Black teachers. So Hannah, who was on the program with us on Sunday, sort of talking about who's doing the teaching and what we're teaching, sort of throw out these statistics in relation to teacher recruitment, retention, and sort of attrition. And she said we lose 36% of trainee teachers by the 3rd year, and we lose 50% of trainee teachers by the 5th year. And she was talking about things like women leaving because of flexible working, being men leaving because of stereotypes or being stereotyped into certain roles. Also, there was a program on the BBC on the Monday after we did our own program where it was raising the issue of Black teachers in UK schools. And it talks about discriminations and barriers to gaining promotion, and talked about how there was underrepresentation at senior levels, including issues to do with disciplinary, and the stats that was given there on that BBC program, it was that there are currently just over 1% of senior leaders within schools that are Black. And our Black teachers are more than 3 times more likely than their white colleagues to face formal action. So these are some stats, and I've got one more to give to you, Ike, which came from the National union that represents teachers, and I understand it has about 300,000 members. And they did a research. And some of the findings from the research were that 77% of BME teachers do not believe that they are paid at a level commensurate with their skills and experiences, compared to 66% of all teachers. That 58% of BME teachers have experienced verbal abuse by pupils, compared to 49% of all teachers. It said 52% of BME teachers do not feel that their work is valued by the school management, compared to 39% of all teachers. And finally, it talks about 64% of BME teachers felt their opinions are not valued by school management, compared to 53% of all teachers. So this is pointing to sort of, your point about, is it fair? It looks a bit unfair when you look at all the reports that we're looking at today.
Yeah.
So what would you say to that?
Oh, goodness, that's a huge one. I mean, I would start off, I guess, with and I hope it leads into all the areas, but we have very narrow. No, that's a little bit unfair. I was going to talk about the curriculum.
Okay.
The general educational curriculum. I was going to say it was very narrow. I'm going to modify that and say it's simply slow in expanding.
Okay.
That might be a fairer way of looking at things. And I use that because for some reason, teachers are not often allowed to, I say not often allowed, are not given the opportunity to show their professionalism. So we kind of come back to that earlier point. We are bogged down with almost the babysitting aspect of our profession, instead of looking at the ways we can promote our profession as being, because when you think about it, if we say that education is the guaranteed way for more members of the society, then ideally you should be putting more resources towards that guaranteed way.
Yeah.
But that doesn't seem to happen, because all we're doing is looking at, okay, we'll just keep these, we'll use these guys as glorified babysitters, while, certain sectors do this and this and this and that, and they seem to be the ones making money, forgetting that before you can get into any of those other sectors, you need a teacher. So really, we need to turn things round, and it doesn't take a genius. You just need to turn things around a little bit and put enough resources into this. And I say this being the teaching sector or the education sector, to say, right, this is the bottom rung, but this bottom rung feeds the top,
right,
in every which way you look at it. So we need to have a curriculum that is ever expanding, that accounts or tries to give space for as many members of society. And this is where I guess sociologists would come into this, because they'd look at how society has changed. You don't need much. ONS, the Office of National Statistics, sociologists, they're always doing research as to national census and stuff. So they know numbers in the country. They know what ethnic backgrounds and so on and so forth. We can have a much, much broader curriculum. Yes, you can still have your 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic. They will be standard, because if we want to feed the world, then you're going to have that. But we can have stuff that broadens us. How do we use maths? How do we use maths in health? How do we use maths in construction? How do we use maths in? That's really what we should be looking at. History. Very often they say history is really just in the eyes of the person telling that story. So let's have a few more eyes telling the story. So you think about Windrush. Yes, you can have a British person telling, a white British person telling the story, but also have a person who's gone through that to tell the story. And let's see where the stories, oh, there's a bit of a difference here.
Yeah.
Or is it all the same? Do you see what I mean? We hear stories about slave trade and so on and so forth. Very interesting stories. Are they always the same? I was talking to some of my, colleagues a few days ago, and you hear about young black people, or black people generally, who have been stopped by police officers. I can't relate to that. It's never happened to me, and I've lived here for goodness knows how long. Long may it continue that I'm never. Now, is that a postcode thing? Is it because I speak a certain way? Is it because I look a certain way? Is it because I carry myself a certain way? I don't know. But I still can't relate to the person who might look, talk, and so on, so like me, but has encountered numerous police stops.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? So it's got to be, we have to have a curriculum that allows for as many eyes and ears to give that narrative. Because really think about it, the curriculum is a reflection of everybody in that society.
Yeah.
And so when I said narrow at the beginning, that's what I meant. It is kind of, it favors maybe one group, which is fair enough, but we have moved. We have moved, and that kind of brings me, if I may digress a bit, we look at, we had the issue about statues and stuff like that. And people were saying knock statues down. And I felt, do we? Because each of those statues tells a story. So if anything, I'd add to those statues, but you'd add a contemporary. Or if you got no space, then I'd take the old statues down, don't knock them down, put them in the museum. And say, look, this is where the story started. What slave trade is a reality. It's something that happened. Now, as clever, progressive, civilized people in 2021 or 2020, what have we learned from the history that's happened? If we haven't learned anything, then sorry, we're not as clever as we think we are. But if we're still treating people exactly the same way, I mean, if we've moved on from that, then we've learned something. So that to do with, the curriculum. Now, obviously, that's going to require resources. The biggest resource is remuneration, so money. And I think this is where a lot of teachers feel undervalued. Compared to other parts of the world, I'm not going to name any names, but compared to other parts of the world, the status of teachers, in England, it's very low. It's very low. You say you're a teacher and people just, oh, okay, right. You kind of mumble, lots of teachers may not even want to say they're teachers because the stereo thing is, oh, you get your 6 weeks holiday and this, and nobody thinks of the fact that you are training the next generation. It's always about the 6 weeks holiday and maybe how much of a burden, what we're going to do in that summer holiday when no one's looking after our kids, But when we talk about pay and value, I think I always tell because I'm part of the senior leadership team, I tell members of the senior leadership team that you can't pay me what I'm worth. You cannot afford me. And I don't say that from an arrogant but I just know what my worth is. But I'm happy to do, so I'll agree, a contractual figure, which is fine. I'll agree that. But I've let them know in no uncertain terms, you can't afford me. Because what I bring to the job is much, much more. Don't tie my hands. And if you can come in with that sort of confidence and substance to back up whatever you're talking about, that will go a long way. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. You will question my students and they'll tell you. So I don't need Ofsted to come and do an observation to find out whether I'm a good teacher or not. Ask the students I teach. And for me, that's always a better, because they won't lie. I'm not saying Ofsted would lie or whatever, but it's just one of those things that we have to, they're supposed to be our objective, independent body that takes care of making sure we do as we're supposed to do. But I think a bit more objective group of people might be the students we teach, because it's beneficial to them.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
the reason for what you do anyway, it's them.
It's them. Yeah. And so I think if we were able to sort of expand our curriculum, as a society, appreciate teachers more, maybe if we could direct a bit more resources. Now, I know recently we've had a 1%, pay increase, but some would say by the time you've added all the other bits and pieces, it doesn't really amount to much. But I think we need to have that sort of national recognition, and it's not an Oscars thing. No, it's from the inside. That teachers, you have to value your teachers, because these are the guys that equip you with the basic skills to become those millionaires, to become those good citizens, to become, people that make whatever country, whatever society a great place. So after your natural parents, your teachers really come next. They're so influential in a person's life, and we have them for, well, pretty much from day one. You think about it, a child has a teacher from, well, if we say they start school at 4 going on 5, formally to 18, that's already 14 years. In university, it's another 3 to 4 years at least. So we're looking at 9 on 20 years.
That's right. Really good, really good. And I do like how you answer the question, because I think for me the one that always gets me is the idea of value. Because I just think people need to be valued for their work. And teachers, like we've talked about, do such a tremendous thing. And I think the value comes from within the system itself, but also from outside the system. The parents, the people, those that interact, society at large, put in more value on teachers, and maybe then we'll be able to retain more of them.
I think so.
Rather than lose them.
Yeah.
And also attract more people. Want to come in to the profession.
I mean, I think about lots of teachers now who have stuck with it and have risen. And you ask them and they say, you know what, I had some really solid teachers. I mean, I can still remember, and I'm sure you can, Paul, you can remember those teachers that just stood out for you. I mean, this is in the primary school that I went to, where, my 11 plus, episode, there are 2 teachers that just, and this is, I'll be giving my age away, but this is decades ago, but I still remember them as though it were yesterday. Very clearly, You
do. I mean, it's like today, I mean, I always said if I did something different from what I'm doing professionally, I'd most likely be a maths teacher. But that goes back to my maths teacher.
There you go.
In secondary school.
Yeah.
And because of one maths teacher, I loved maths all my life, and always thought, you know what, if I was ever going to be a teacher, I'd love to be a maths teacher.
Yeah. And it's wonderful. I mean, I had the pleasure of visiting he was our school chaplain. But he'd also taught RE, and he did lots of different things. But I had the pleasure of just popping in to see him a few days ago. And it was just wonderful. Just sitting with him and thinking, wow, And we went back, did a bit of, down memory lane, but it was just brilliant.
Excellent.
And he has been one of those people who have, inspired and motivated, a number of us to just get on with life and do well, because they worked with our parents.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, so some of the things you also said, Ike, so in your final words, you sort of were encouraging the young people and the young audience, and I think all of us, to take ownership or responsibility for our future. Those were your final words.
Yeah.
And I just want you to explain that in a bit more detail, especially for a young person, hearing take ownership or responsibility for my future. How do they do that? What does that really mean, practically for them in terms of where they're at and where they're trying to get to?
Okay. I think young people have the wonderful advantage of space, emotionally, physically, socially, they have a bit more space. And I know things are relative, but the older you get, you've got added associated things to deal with. But as a young person, you have fewer responsibilities. And for me, it's a great opportunity to spend a bit more time trying to understand themselves and find their specific niche in society. And it's so, rather than sort of, and I'm not saying that don't have a great time, but spend an equal amount of time sort of in reflective mode, sort of thinking, okay, I'm not a mistake. I have a purpose. What is that purpose? And listening to that inner voice, and not being afraid to ask for help.
Yeah.
So your first guide will always be mum and dad. If mum and dad are not available, there might be grown-ups in a person's life. Yeah, significant grown-ups. And I want to say, avoid asking your peers, because your peers will more likely tell you what you want to hear.
Yeah.
But ask somebody who's going to be very, very objective. Pause for a second. Is it possible to pause? Because someone's at the...
Oh, yeah.
Do you mind?
So I have another question that I want to ask you.
Okay.
Because on the day you gave some final words, and your final words were to take ownership or responsibility for your future.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that applies to everybody. But I'm thinking about a young person now who's hearing those words and thinking, how do I take ownership or responsibility for my future? What does that actually mean, in spite of the barriers or anything that I come across in life on this journey? How do I practically do this? And I just want you to explain that for our young audience.
Okay. I think young people, they have the added advantage of having a little bit more space. And I use the word space in terms of social space, emotional space, physical space. You get to a certain age in your life and you've got added complications, as it were, that we have to deal with. Comes with the territory, as it were. But younger people, they have a little bit more latitude. And I always feel that in that space, they should try to be a bit more reflective in order to find out what their purpose is. Because they need to take on board the fact that they are born, created rather, with a mission, with an assignment, with a task to do. And it very often is a service. It's something, of a service, not just to, but in a very big way. And I think the reason why we find lots of youngsters sort of what we might call floundering or losing their way is because they haven't quite found their purpose. Because the moment you find your purpose, it just gives you drive, it gives you motivation. You start seeing opportunities for where your natural giftings will fit in. And that's where lots of people seem to fall short. So when I was saying that, I was saying, well, okay, be a bit more reflective. That's one. Spend time. Yes, have fun, go to parties, do the things you can do as a youngster, but also spend a similar amount of time reflecting on your purpose. Ask significant adults in your life. So mum and dad will be your usual first ports of call. If they are not available, uncles, aunties, but significant adults. These might be teachers that you trust. These might be mentors. I am so privileged, this is the way I look at it, that I've been mentoring some youngsters since they were 9 years old.
Wow. Wow.
They are 14 going on 15. And I have to scratch my head that one, they have stuck with me. They still feel, I'm relevant in their lives. They've gone, some have gone to different parts of the world because they've left the UK now, and they still keep in touch. And I think to myself, wow. But it's that sort of thing. It's being able to, and they still say, Mr. Odina, can you do this? What about this? And it's just that sort of thing. Because we all need somebody who can just spot something and say, that's a gift. That's a gift, And so it's being able to seek help. Don't be too proud to seek help. And I suppose that goes for all of us. We can't do everything by ourselves, because if you did, then your name would be God. So it's about being able to say, right, okay, I can do this, but in order for us to get to this wonderful height, I'm going to have to take a few other people with me. I'm going to have to seek the support, assistance, whatever of a few other people. And in doing that, you're helping that other person to achieve something in their lives. So it's really a win-win for all of us. I think that's really, and then taking ownership, really, you just take responsibility.
Yes.
I think a lot of our youngsters are responsible, and I just felt so proud, really, when I heard the 6 or 7 young people during our meeting on Sunday, and I thought, wow, you could have ended it after them. You didn't need, the so-called, I think you call us experts, I don't know. You didn't need us, because they had covered pretty much everything in, eloquently, articulately. There wasn't any hyped up emotion. It was just facts. It was clinical. It was lovely. So, which is why I started off by saying, if these are the youngsters that we have now, then we're in very good hands.
Yes.
The future is very, very bright. So it's about taking responsibility. And each of those young people that we heard, in some area, they had taken on the responsibility of saying, you know what? I'm not an accident. I'm not a mistake. I'm here for a reason. Yeah. I'm going to spend some time looking for what my purpose is, and I'm going to carry it out to the fullest.
Excellent. I like that. I like that. And one of the things you brought in there, which raises a question I'm going to ask you, was you mentioned God. And I think about the role of faith, in all that we're talking about, how our faith, sort of also has a part to play in all of this. And I just wanted you to just say a little bit from your perspective on how you see the role of faith, our belief, in some of the issues we're talking about, and in some of the ways that we can get to where we're trying to get to.
Yeah. Oh, big. That's for me. For me, my faith centers me. It's my rudder. It's my guide. It's everything to me. And I think I might have had this discussion with you, because I see Jesus Christ, for example, as the freedom fighter, par excellence. There is no other one that can stand next to him in terms of fighting for people's freedom.
Yes.
I mean, we say there's stories, but look at parables. There's different narratives in the Bible where he stood up against wrongs, social wrongs. And so I see myself doing exactly the same thing, but it's how he did it. He used the system. Yes. When he was arguing with Pharisees, he didn't come up, with, clubs and whatever. No, he used what they understood. He used the very, very Torah. And he said, well, okay, how do you want me to be able to do this if you're stopping me from doing that? It doesn't make sense. Yes. So, and they were all scholarly people, and he would use that. He said, you guys are supposed to be the cleverest people in Israel. How do you do this? They couldn't argue with him. wonderful one. Give unto Caesar what is Caesar, but give unto God what is God.
Yes.
You know, what were they trying to do? All the time trying to catch him out. But he was a freedom fighter, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
But he did it knowing exactly who he who he is. He clear identity, clear purpose.
Excellent.
Clear purpose. And so that's exactly the same for me. So yes, there will be times I will, when appropriate and when necessary, I will say I'm a Christian. But more often than not, people can see it.
Yeah.
People can see it. And that will be my opportunity to talk about it. Because I've heard people say that, goodness, you know, I have people at work that, you know, they just say, oh, you're a shepherd. And I think, oh, goodness. You know, they come up with terms like that. And I know exactly where they're coming from. So you don't have to put on any airs and graces. Know who you are. Be as natural as possible. And believe you me, God will work through you.
Excellent.
I think our job, as I'm talking from a Christian perspective, is to just allow him to work through you. And people, in accordance with his word, people will be drawn to him.
Yes. Wow. Thank you. So finally, this has been brilliant. Finally, if there's anything else you want to say, you know, because I think you've spoken to young people, you've definitely spoken to parents, you've spoken to teachers, you've spoken to the system, you've spoken to society at large, you know, you've spoken to, I mean, there's been something for everyone in what you said today. But if there's anything else you want to say around how we can make a concerted effort towards sustainable change that you may not have mentioned, I'm going to give you that opportunity to say it in your final closing words.
Oh, goodness. I think I just kind of sum up everything I've said is that we're all together. You know, I think we've had a previous prime minister who said that, you know, we are all one community. He called it the big society. I got the sentiment behind that, you know, as to the, you know, the what you call it, implementation of it. It's different, but I definitely got the sentiment. We are one big society, and if we start to see each other that way, you know, it makes such a difference. And you just watch children playing; they don't care, boys, girls. There is no distinction, black, white. It's wonderful just watching them. And I think we need to go back to a place where we are childlike in our tolerance of one another and acceptance of one another. And then we'll start to see progress.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ike. I have loved talking with you.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. Thanks you.
Thanks for sharing. Thanks for being open. Thanks for your passion and your energy. You know, I know it because I've known you for a number of years, you know, and I know that everything you say is exactly as it is. You know,
thank you very much.
This is it. So
thank you
for that. Really appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll be talking some more about this. So
I hope so.
On the couch again soon. You know, so I look forward to welcoming you again. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Fols. Have a lovely day. All right.
I will do. Thank you.
God bless. Bye-bye.
Bye.